A frog is a cold-blooded animal, and humans are warm-blooded, so our body burns energy or perspires to maintain the same 98.6 degrees. The cold-blooded frog's body temperature goes up and down with the temperature of its surroundings. Although frogs love water, when I hold it over this pot of boiling water, this frog is very uncomfortable and climbs to get away from it. Now, the water in this pot is room temperature, 69.4 degrees, so he's comfortable when I put him in. If I turn the burner on low flame, his body temperature will adjust and slowly he will heat up with the water. The water temperature has risen to 80 degrees and the frog is the same temperature and still comfortable. If I turn up the burner slowly again, he won't notice because he'll continue to change to be the same as his surroundings. When we started, I held the frog over the first pot of boiling water. He was uncomfortable and he tried to get away from the heat. But now, because we're raising the temperature slowly, he doesn't recognize the danger he's in. He just keeps going along with the changes in his surroundings. Eventually, we can turn up the burner to a deadly boil. He will just keep trying to adjust with it. By the time he realizes it's killing him, it's too late. He won't notice in time because he just keeps changing himself to go along with the changes in his surroundings.
Hello friends and welcome to the Freedom Factory. This is episode 8 that we're up to, and this episode comes at the end of a week of real pressure on free speech here in New Zealand and a couple of high profile YouTube channels being cancelled. So the other morning we saw Vinnie Eastwood, the longest running truth show in New Zealand, had both of his YouTube channels deleted. We also saw Damien Dement had his channel deleted at the same time. Interestingly, Damien did not have any active strikes, having won his appeal to YouTube over his first strike only a few days ago, and they then turn around and delete his channel outright. To me, this raises the question, did YouTube have a change of heart, or did they respond to political direction from New Zealand? So we have got an interesting show lined up for you this week. First up, we're going to have a look at proposals against incitement of hatred and discrimination in Aotearoa in New Zealand. So this is a discussion document released by the government this week that would see hate speech move to the Crimes Act. Next, we will have a look at a story from Speak Up for Women NZ, who successfully challenged their council venue cancellations in the High Court this week, which is a bit of good news. Then we're going to have a look at the death of John McAfee in a Spanish prison. So this is in fact the first time that this show has covered an international story. After that, we're going to ride along with Lee Williams as he goes into the press building to try and get a chance to respond to their slander. That's an interesting wee journey there. Then we've got a coffee and catch-up event that was held here in Christchurch on Thursday evening, hosted by the Canterbury Agricultural Action Group. It was a great wee event. Then we catch up with the Nelson Knight as on his South Tour promoting landfreedom.net and the allodial land claims. We interviewed Mark Thompson just before the talk in Christchurch. So let's get going on the show. So now we're going to have a look at a government document that was put out this week for public consultation. It is titled Proposals Against Incitement of Hatred and Discrimination in Aotearoa, New Zealand. From the document, social cohesion in Aotearoa, New Zealand is about being a place where everyone feels they belong. An important part of achieving social cohesion is to stand against conduct and language that harms people. We are stronger because of our diversity. Experiences of hatred can make people feel unsafe and unwelcome in the places they should feel at home. We want to hear what you think of 6 government proposals to make Aotearoa New Zealand safer for everyone by strengthening the parts of existing law that protect groups from speech that incites hatred, and by improving protections against discrimination. The incitement of hatred against a group based on a shared characteristic such as ethnicity, religion, or sexuality is an attack on our values of inclusiveness and diversity. Such incitement is intolerable and has no place in our society. The 6 proposals that we would like to hear your views on relate to changing the language in the incitement provisions in the Human Rights Act 1993 so that they protect more groups that are targeted by hateful speech. Replacing the existing criminal provision in the Human Rights Act 1993 with a new criminal offence in the Crimes Act 1961 that is clearer and more effective. Increasing the punishment for the criminal offence to better reflect its seriousness. Changing the language of the civil incitement provision to match the changes being made to the criminal provision. Changing the civil provision so that it makes incitement to discriminate against the law. Adding to the groups of discrimination in the Human Rights Act to clarify that transgender, diverse and intersex people are protected from discrimination. So many groups get special protection in our society. Somehow I don't think that conservative groups are included in that special protection. And I wonder just how safe and welcome conservative groups feel in this environment. The next story, for example. So a few weeks ago, we covered a group called Speaking Up for Women NZ when they had their Christchurch event cancelled. Now this week they have filed High Court proceedings in Auckland against the Auckland and Palmerston North Councils following the cancellation of room bookings for their public events. They've engaged Nicolette Levy QC and they also have the support of the Free Speech Union. So I'll just read you from a post from Speaking Up for Women on the 21st of June. In Auckland, we were banned from the Pioneer Women's Hall in the Central Business District because the council thought the views likely to be expressed may cause harm to staff and other users of the facility, even if they are not physically present at the venue or event. We are particularly hurt by the reasoning given by Auckland Council. In effect, they are saying that our views would contaminate the venue. But feminism has a strong history of challenging comfortable views or even official orthodoxy. So later on the week, on the Friday, the 25th, they have posted this. We won. Today, Justice Gerald Nation granted us interim relief against Palmerston North City Council, meaning our meeting to discuss the controversial sex self-identification clauses within the Births, Deaths, Marriages and Relationships Registration Bill will go ahead tonight in Palmerston North Central Library at 6:30 p.m. as planned. In handing down the decision, Justice Nation noted, having considered the evidence and submissions of counsel, the court grants the applicant the relief sought and makes an order that the licence to occupy created by the agreement to hire the mezzanine meeting space at the Palmerston North City Library between 6:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. on the 25th of June 2021 continues in force. Reasons will follow in due course. This case was important as it vindicates our group, believing that biological sex matters and should not be replaced by the idea of gender identity in law is worthy of respect in a democratic society and so entitled to protection under the right to freedom of expression. In the hearing, counsel for both Auckland and Palmerston North City Councils acknowledged that it was neither council's position that the case was about hate speech. So it really is a good victory here from this group. It is interesting that yet again they have backed down when challenged. So a great victory for the week, and I'm glad to report on it. So now we want to have a look at the death of John McAfee this week, and we begin with a look at a Zero Hedge article that is titled John McAfee Found Dead in Prison Cell After US Extradition Approved. And I quote, McAfee's lawyer has confirmed to ABC News that his client was found dead in a Spanish jail cell on Wednesday. The 75-year-old entrepreneur was arrested on tax evasion charges for failing to file tax returns for 4 years. He has been in jail in Spain since October the 6th, facing charges that he hid significant assets which included real estate and a yacht. His defense lawyers had argued that the extradition request was politically motivated and therefore wasn't appropriate. He disagreed with the current monetary system and has made him public enemy number one, according to court documents released on Wednesday. So let's have a look at a video that John McAfee published back in July of 2020, calling out the so-called deep state in the US. Now remember, a week later he was arrested in Spain. Check the video out.
The deep state is a conspiracy theory it's defined as the people within the U.S. government and military who are in secret control of government policy. Secret? Please, people. The deep state is those people within the U.S. government that are career employees that cannot be fired by people that we elect by the Congress or the President. There are the FCC, the CIA, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the IRS. Are these people in control? Can they enact laws? Fuck yes. They're called regulations. For every law that Congress passes, and we elect Congress to pass our laws, there are 20 regulations enacted by federal agencies that have far more impact on our lives than anything Congress can possibly pass. Is there a deep state? Yes. Can we fire these people? No. Can presidents fire them? No. It's designed that way so that political parties and political interests cannot affect the deep state. Do you understand the nightmare of our situation, people? I'm sorry. It's not secret. It's as open as anything could be. In the past, since 1975, 200,000 regulations have been passed by our federal agencies, encompassing 800,000 pages of fine print. People, it is no secret. It is as open as it can be. The deep state does control America. Wake up, people, please. God, use some common fucking sense. Thank you.
So John has expressed concerns for his safety a number of times over the last couple of years. And we're going to look at a couple of these times on Twitter. The first one was from December the 1st, 2019, so about 7 or 8 months before his arrest. And I quote, "Getting subtle messages from US officials saying, in effect, 'We're coming for you, McAfee. We're going to kill yourself.' I got a tattoo today, just in case. If I suicide myself, I didn't. I was whacked. Check my right arm." And another one that he tweeted out on the 16th of October 2020, so this was just after his arrest. "I am content in here. I have friends. The food is good. All is well. Know that if I hang myself, a la Epstein, it was by no fault of mine." After this, another user writes, "Let's get a preemptive trending. Hashtag McAfee didn't kill himself." So a few days ago, there was a rather emotional video from John's wife, and we're going to play that for you now. Here it is.
John McAfee was not suicidal. I spoke with him a few hours before he was found dead. We spoke about the court's decision to extradite him to the U.S. It did not come as a surprise to either of us. We were prepared for that decision and had a plan of action already in place to appeal that decision. I blame the U.S. authorities for this tragedy. Because of these politically motivated charges against him, my husband is now dead. His last words to me were, "I love you and I will call you in the evening." Those words are not words of someone who is suicidal. All John wanted to do was spend his remaining years fishing and drinking. He did not deserve to die in a filthy prison like a caged animal. We knew that there would be an uphill battle to continue to fight this situation. But he's a fighter. He's always a fighter, and anybody that knows John, that knows him even a little bit, knows that about him. He would never quit this way. He would never take his life in this way. I didn't believe he did this, and I will get answers. I want answers of how this was able to happen.
So a poignant reminder of the human dimension to this story there, and much sympathy to the people affected. And it will be interesting to see what comes to light over the next few weeks. John was rumoured to have made information provisions, shall we say, a dead man's switch, on a number of occasions, so we may very well see some interesting things come to light over the coming weeks. Now we're going to move on to something that happened here in Christchurch on Friday when Lee Williams decided to go into the press building on Gloucester Street here in Christchurch in the hope of getting to have his say in the wake of a media slander campaign that Lee was not given a chance to respond to. So quite fundamental stuff there. And Lee invited us along for the ride. So here's the report. Alright guys, so we're here outside the press building in central Christchurch with Lee Williams. He's just about to go in and see if he can have a discussion with them. So we'll see how much they let us film. Take you guys along for the ride.
Hi. Hi. Is it possible I can speak to a senior journalist or an editor?
Yeah, what's it regarding?
It's my name is Lee Williams, and I've been branded a far-right white supremacist by Stuff and the press, and I want to ask them why.
Yeah, no
Okay,
worries.
thank you.
We're on a meeting, but she's going to give you the number to pick up the phone.
I want to see some. That's okay.
He's not available right now.
Any journalist?
No.
Manager?
Friday, so it's quite busy. Yeah.
What about a manager or boss? Is there a manager or
Any
something?
manager, anybody in office?
Try.
A boss.
So the editor has requested if you could contact her via telephone. She's not wanting to discuss any matters with you while the camera is running.
Okay, I'll turn the cameras off.
Okay, and then she's willing to discuss any matters you've got over the phone.
Not willing to meet me here now in person.
No, so she's not. If you'd like to, sir, come into this office here, and if you'd be kind enough to give me your cell phone number, I'll get you to contact you.
Nothing.
Directly. Yep. Nice and comfortable in here and private for you.
Hello, Lee speaking.
Oh, hello Lee. My name is Camilla Hayden. I'm editor of the press. I understand you've come in to see us in the building.
Yes, I have. I would like to ask you and Stuff News and the press why you've defamed me in the media and called me, Lee Williams of Cross the Rubicon YouTube channel, a far-right white supremacist, and linked me to the Christchurch mosque massacre.
I'm not aware that we've linked you to the mosque massacre.
Yeah, you have.
I think all New Zealanders know who's responsible for the mosque massacre and that he's behind bars, so I just don't accept that we've linked you to it in any way.
Yeah, well, I think you did, and you've called me over and over again a white supremacist, and you've put my face all over the media 4 weeks ago and said I'm the face of white supremacy in New Zealand. Now, I've been sacked from...
I know that there are stories that are being published on NZ and Herald as well. How do you speak to them?
Well, I'm starting with you because I'm in Christchurch. And do you realise I've been sacked from my job, I've been defamed, and my character has been character assassinated not only by the media but by the Maori Party in New Zealand, including Debbie Packer and Rawiri Waititi, for me making a satire video of Rawiri Waititi, a satire video. And now I've lost everything.
You've been banned, or your YouTube videos have been removed by YouTube.
They have.
I know for some time you have been attracting the attention of official bodies who don't like what you have to say.
No, I've attracted the attention from far leftists and the Maori Party. Okay, that's
so
good.
I stand by the story that we've published. And,
You stand by the story,
we're not
okay.
going to be changing it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you know what? So, can you give me a definition of white supremacy exactly?
No, not straight away. I should also add that the stories were written by nobody in Christchurch, but by our business team. I'm not quite sure where.
It doesn't matter who wrote it. It's just that
I'm
you
just
ran
saying
it.
that I'm not as familiar with the
Yeah,
story as you
yeah,
are.
yeah.
But I know that it's been through a careful process, and we stand by it. No, before we published the story, you were asked, you were given an opportunity to comment.
A comment? When was this?
Before the story was published.
No, I didn't hear nothing about that at all. You know full well. No one contacted me about any story being published.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll certainly take that up and check what the reporter did.
Okay, what is your name again?
My name's Kamala Hayman.
Kamala Hayman.
That's enough. The conversation's not going anywhere. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
So this week in Christchurch we had the first meeting organised by the Canterbury Agricultural Action Group, and I went along to cover it for you, so here's the report. 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and we are gathered here at a venue on Litchfield Street in central Christchurch for the first coffee catch-up meeting organised by the Canterbury Agricultural Action Group. As you can see, we have quite a good turnout really, with over 50 people here. This is one of the groups that came about as a result of the community meetings organised by Rob Wilson and Heather Marie Pennycook of Agricultural Action Group. So one of this evening's organisers, Aisha Thornley, was an excellent MC, and the guest speaker for the meeting was Peter Gunn, who has an extensive experience as an exploration geologist in the coal industry. Peter's presentation on the conundrum of climate change was a look at the climate data that is cited and used by the IPCC and others, then to compare it to the narrative that is pushed out politically. The direct comparison demonstrates the falsehood of the agenda-driven narrative. As the proceedings finished, the conversation began and continued for as long as the meeting itself. And in the opinion of this try-hard reporter, that this is the real uprising, this grassroots groups coming together around common concerns, a common cause, if you will, and forming friendships and community. Yeah, we really do have all the solutions amongst the people. And when we exercise our freedom of assembly, we can open source these solutions. So I thought definitely a successful event, and testimony to this success was that people stayed for the entire event and long afterwards just to connect with each other. So Mark Thompson is here in town doing the Nelson Knight South Tour, promoting landfreedom.net, allodial land claims, and the First Breath community, and also all matters to co-create our new world. Mark has done talks in Timaru, Dunedin and Alexandra, and this evening he's here in Christchurch. So I went along and interviewed Mark just before his talk this evening. And here's that interview for you. Hey friends, so we are here with Mark Thompson. Hey Mark, welcome to the interview.
Thanks very much, Adam. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be speaking to you again. It's been a few weeks. So we're here at Community Centre in Linwood, aren't we? And you're running an event tonight. Do you want to begin just by telling us a bit about this evening's event?
Okay, well thanks Adam. The event is really just the launch of Land Freedom, landfreedom.net, one word, landfreedom.net. And that group has been formed to specifically look at remedies that we may be able to have for actions of government agencies and Crown agencies, and what remedies we may have as living men, living women in respect to our land, firstly. So matters to do with our mortgages, our rates, and incursions on our land, specifically for the farming community. As you're probably aware, the farming community is coming under massive attack on all angles. It's coming under attack under the what's called number of different names, but down here in South Island, SNAs, or significant natural areas, where the government and local government is claiming major tracts of land 20, 30, 40, in one case up to 80% of a farm area, and basically telling the farmer he cannot farm that land. And of course, for most farmers, even a 20 or 30% land grab is significant, especially when they've got the ongoing costs of maintaining it, and it could send many of them broke. And I believe that's part of the intention. The broader plan here is to fit us in to the Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 program that Jacinda has signed us up to. And the plan is pretty much, Adam, that by 2050, according to their documents, not mine, by 2050 you will own nothing and you shall be happy. So farmers out there that may be watching that is if you haven't seen that document, I really would encourage you to get your hands on it. The original document, there are copies of it floating around. In fact, there is a copy on the AAG website. So we are working very closely with the Agricultural Action Group, AAG, and I think their website is aag.org.nz. That's right. Yeah. So I would encourage people to have a look at that, to understand what it is that the government's doing. So basically they're doing land grabs. They're also putting in place with the carbon emissions scheme and so forth, claiming that farmers are carbon emitters because of the cows predominantly, and because of that, in their weird way of thinking, grasslands grasslands are either contributing to the CO2 or not taking from it. In actual fact, if you took their grassland, and anybody that's studied science or biology or anything, these things, sorts of sciences, will probably realise that grass sucks up CO2, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So, but of course that doesn't be made into the calculation. A bit of a small oversight there, Adam.
Yeah,
they just didn't put that into the calculation. If they put that into the calculation, of course there are hundreds of thousands of hectares of grassland across New Zealand, up the hills and everywhere. Yeah. And of course, if you put that into the calculation, then New Zealand is actually overall, we are a nation that sucks up the CO2. So if you buy into the CO2 rubbish, which personally I do not, then New Zealand should be getting paid billions of dollars. And of course, what the government has done is very cleverly left that out, and then turned the townies like you and I onto the farmers and created this picture that the farmers are the polluters and the farmers are doing all this and the farmers are bad, and pitting us against the farmers. So when they now come in effect to these sorts of strategies, you and I just sit back and say, oh, well, about time, they deserved it or whatever. No. The farmers are the backbone to this economy. They feed 50 million people. 50 million now.
Yeah, and there is a narrative that has been turned against the farmers. And really this is how we push back against it, is by informing people and better informing ourselves as to our rights and the true nature of the science that's being talked about in these narratives, really, isn't it?
Well, there is no science to the narratives,
right,
of course,
yeah.
and of course if you are a scientist and you're speaking out, then you are squashed. What we have now in politics globally is pretty much talking heads, all being driven out of the UN agenda, where we've got talking heads who are pushing aside people that have got 20, 30, 40 years plus experience in whether it's science or whether it's medicine, etc., etc. These people are just being deplatformed. They're being told the big tech like Facebook and YouTube and the like are basically deplatforming these people and saying we do not want to hear these things. The science is settled or the medicine is settled. We do not want to debate on these things, and if you are talking against the narrative, even though you may be a highly qualified person, for example, just jump over to the vaccine, so-called vaccine bioweapon thing. You've got people like Michael Yaden, the former vice president of Pfizer, coming out and emotively pleading that this thing doesn't carry on. He knows what's in this mRNA experimental jab, and he's pleading against it, and yet he's totally dissed. And instead we'll listen to some talking head young woman out of university who's basically got no experience, who's parroting the government narrative. And she supposedly, because of the colour of her hair or whatever the heck how she wants to identify, that becomes her credibility. in front of the New Zealand public. And of course it's not. It's not science, it's all basically virtue signalling politicians and talking heads that have been given a platform and are left unchallenged.
Yeah, and that's right. And this is, these conversations, these technical conversations are still happening in the society. It's just that they're happening in small groups and community centres around the country. They're not happening on television shows or on our, current affairs shows or in our parliament for that matter, are they? It's real people coming together like this. So after a series of these events, what sort of response have you had from the community around the South Island?
I mean, I've been blown away at them at the level of interest and what I would call the activation of people. I put this thing together very quickly because I actually had an alternative plan that didn't work out. And so I decided to get on the road myself and come down and start trying to kind of rally the people, so to speak, and stir up some interest. And so there hasn't been a huge amount of time. I mean, we're talking 24, 48 hours to put together meetings such as this today. And but there is such a level of interest, particularly amongst our rural sector, because they're feeling the pain. They can see. Most of them are smart enough to see what's coming and that the government is coming to take their land away. So the government's coming for your land, whether you're a rural guy or even if you're urban. The government's coming for your children. They want to jab your children. So these two completely disparate issues are not actually disparate. They are being driven by the same source being a global agenda with the nation of New Zealand being run, not from New Zealand, but being run from the United Nations, with their little puppets having their place, supposedly in a democratic election, which is, as far as I'm concerned, quite bollocks. But with their puppets sitting there telling us the way it's going to be. And this is not how it's going to be, because, Adam, we're going to change this.
Yeah, that's right, we are going to change this. And this is how we're going to change it, pretty much, just by these grassroots interactions and people forming relationships and friendships and informing themselves, really, aren't they? And this really is information warfare, isn't it?
Absolutely, and this is what this global war is about. This war is unlike any other in human history. It's not about, and I've been talking about this for over a year now, it's not about us donning a uniform and going to the other side of the world and fighting against somebody who speaks a different language wearing a different uniform. No, this war is a battle of ideologies, and we are fighting our colleagues at work, or our friends, or our family, our children, or our siblings. In some cases, the person that's lying next to us, Adam, holding different views. And there have been many, many stories. I've heard many of relationship splits through these issues where people find themselves on opposite side of the chasm. And in this information of war, this war on information and the war of what's going on and ideologies in our head, those that support the government agenda and believe that we have a kind Prime Minister who is acting out of the care and interest for all of New Zealand, and those that are awake to the global agenda on which she has held her hand up and proudly said that she wants to be the first nation of the world to fully implement the Agenda 2030 protocols. And that was said at the goalkeepers back in 2019, I think it was, maybe 2020, in New York, where Jacinda said that. But people sort of can say, oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, no, they can just watch the video. They can see it for themselves. This is what our government, and even if National got it, it'll be exactly the same. Okay, Jacinda's stronger. Jacinda's pushing it real hard. She's the special student of the UN, so to speak, the top girl, and she wants to prove to the UN that she can pull this off for them.
She does, yeah. So this is really quite a good journey you've had around the South Island, isn't it? Having these meetings and informing people, and you do have a website or two, don't you, for these ventures? Do you want to
yes. So the main website that we're working from for this part of the project is landfreedom.net. One word, landfreedom.net, and we've chosen that domain, Adam, because we didn't put an NZ in there. And the reason for that is we believe that what we're about to do here in New Zealand is not only significant for New Zealand, but is significant for the world. And when we achieve what we're hoping to achieve here, then other countries will follow. I believe Ireland will follow us next, and then we'll have somewhere from New Zealand at the bottom of the Pacific, across to Ireland in the northern hemisphere. Then fairly soon after that, I think other countries will follow, because what we will be doing, and the analogy I use is one of those big hollow Easter eggs, when you're a kid and you got one of those and you loved it, you poke your hole in it, and what happens, the whole thing kind of, gets cracks and everything, and the whole integrity of the egg is now damaged, isn't it? And then it's easily broken. That's what we're doing here, and it's a very significant move. It's interestingly, I mean, I'll go back to my Māori side, and I think possibly you've got a bit of Māori heritage as well, but actually they had it right, because they didn't have a concept of land ownership. They had a concept of land guardianship, or kaitiaki. Yeah? And that's really where we're taking people back to. We're taking people back to living men, living women, on the land, planted on the land, and living in an attitude of guardianship for our land. So we don't need governments to tell us how to look after our land. We want to look after our land. And most people I talk to want to look after the land.
That's right.
Nobody wants to pollute it.
Yeah, no.
That we've got this concept that we need to be controlled by the government.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that about?
Well, politics ruins everything, really. It does, including land management and communities. So, we do have all the solutions amongst the people. We don't actually need a big government just telling us what to do we? But what we do need is an educated populace and educated communities, and that's really what this process is about, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this is about raising up 80 trainers throughout the country. So we've basically got every council covered, in terms of, so we've got somebody planted, at least one person in every council, every regional council, and obviously the bigger areas like Auckland will have multiple trainers there because of the geographic and the size of the actual area for people to come, north, south, east and west, central, and those groups will then be educated into what we're talking about and the benefits of actually moving back to allodial as it was before the Westerners arrived on our shores. That's how land was actually settled here in New Zealand and many parts of the world, actually. I mean, there's nothing new or novel about the way that Māori did it, but that was sort of more the natural way, or the natural system that we always had, up until governments got involved and started messing the entire thing up.
Up until the corporation.
Absolutely, the corporation.
Took it over, really.
So basically, we have to break the corporation, and or we have to choose to step out of that sandpit. And this is not so much about people say, "Oh, you're trying to pull the government down." No, we're not trying to pull the government down at all. All we're doing is we're saying we do not want to play in that sandpit. It is a false paradigm. We want to live as living men, living women on the land. Period.
Yeah, that's right. We don't need to pull the government down.
No.
We just simply stop supporting them.
Well, we're just not playing in that sandpit.
Yeah.
We're stepping out of that sandpit and saying, look, you guys can have that by all means. Fill up your beehive if you want. Make your papers. Every act of legislation says this act binds the crown.
Yeah, that's
it doesn't
right.
say.
That's right.
Interestingly, Adam, it doesn't say. You think with all the smart people, it would say this binds living men and living women. It doesn't.
No, that's right.
Most of them don't even define New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got a big problem because it's this beautiful system. I mean, look, people talk about the climate change scam, and other people talk about the COVID scamdemic. Those scams pale in insignificance to the scam that you and I and our forefathers have been sold, this illusionary thing of corporate that the government has created and the banks have created, the judiciary support it. It's just this massive illusion that we're living under, and it's like, I kind of like it. I say to people, well, I look around the room and you people, you're still believing in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and pink unicorns at your age, really, Excuse me. Really, it's time we grow up and get our education.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, a classic example of this, it's been around for years, is try and find the law that says you have to pay income tax for example. It actually doesn't exist. And people simply pay the income tax out of convention, out of just this idea that we're meant to pay it. There's no actual...
Yeah, well, I better be careful because I'm... excuse me. Frog in my throat. As a former tax agent, most accountants are called tax agents.
Yeah, that's right.
Which means you're an agent of the Crown, aren't you? Yeah. And pretty much every employer is a tax agent because they're collecting and deducting taxes from their employee, be it PAYE, etc., and then paying it to the land revenue. But yes, New Zealand does operate a voluntary taxation system. So some people are basically writing to Inland Revenue and saying, hey, dear Inland Revenue, thank you for allowing me to participate in your voluntary scheme. I don't want your number anymore. I've just found out it's voluntary. Here's your number back, your number, not my number. Here's your number back. Could you please do a calculation of how much tax I paid since age 13, and could you please deposit that into my bank account? Recognising the fraud that actually is income tax.
That's right, the fraud of income tax.
But we see what's happened is by contract we're drawn into that, and what part of our teaching, our broader teaching, is around how people get pulled back into contract, into the corporate. And look, there is a million tricks they use to do that, Adam. They keep trying to pull you back. They keep getting you to sign in the box, and names and in capitals, and all these tricks. Register your car, and register your child, and register this and register that, etc., etc. And they keep. And when you go to court, they'll say, "Oh, Mr. Nuttall." Mr. Nuttall, and they'll try and pull you back, and that's a contract. Mr. Nuttall, all capitals. They're trying to pull you back into contract. So we teach people how to stay free, so you're not pulled back into their sandpit. Because once you've stepped out of that sandpit, Adam, you don't want to really get back in. Under duress, you might have to live certain aspects of your life, but ideally, you don't want to.
And this really is a process for this nation that we're going through. It is one system collapsing and hopefully another one growing out of the community. So
it's a beautiful thing, brother.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. We are co-creating a new world. It's an absolute new world, and we're starting here in New Zealand, or some like to say Aotearoa. We are starting it here, and I believe we are going to become a beacon for the entire world. And most people know that New Zealand's been a testing ground for lots and lots of things over the years. We're a small island state, and it's very good to be able to test things on a place like this. Small population, under 5 million, etc. But and a lot of dastardly things have been given to us and tested on us over the years, as you're probably aware. But here's an opportunity for a beautiful thing to happen, for it to happen with our people, and particularly with our Maori people, because there's one thing I wanted to bring up is that in my lifetime, 1974, the Treaty of Waitangi Act came about. And of course that was just another illusion on an illusion, because here we had the government create this new structure called iwi, which of course is just a corporate entity. And the government owns all corporate entities. They own your capital name and capital, so they own your dead legal fiction. They don't own Living Man Adam, but they own Adam Nuttall, all capitals, right? And they own every iwi. So here we have government on the left hand doing deals with Māori, with various tribes, and then passing stuff to iwi, which is a government corporation. So it's the left hand of the government giving the right hand of the government, and Māori thinking that they've got anything. But of course, as most Māori know, only the guys that are sitting at the top of those structures are actually really benefiting.
Yeah, and in a real sense, what's happened is that the corporate structure at the top has simply moved assets over to one of its subsidiaries.
It's just passing things from one balance sheet to another.
Yeah, that's right.
Where Rungy Average hasn't scored anything really.
Yeah, exactly.
Some iwi have probably done a little bit better with the filter down and been able to access those funds, and actually some people have benefits. So to be fair, there are probably, I don't know how many, but probably there's half a dozen that have actually done something.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Correct.
Isn't it? So
that's right. Yeah. Good analogy.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, it's been great to speak to you today, Mark, and really looking forward to the event. I'll get some footage of the event once it gets started in probably about half an hour, and we'll put on the end of this video. So thanks very much for speaking to us today. And Yeah, it's just great to see you again, as always. So
Thanks
take
so
care.
much, and thank you to your viewers for tuning in.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks
Great
very
to be
much,
here.
guys. See you next time.
Ciao. For our people. So more latterly, I've got involved. I've got a business background. I've managed accounting firms. I own my own public accounting firms. I've owned lots and lots of businesses over the years. Worked here in Australia and in other parts around the world.
So that was the Freedom Factory, episode 8. And if you like the show, don't be afraid to support it. You know, we do operate on surprisingly little resources. You can find a link to do this on our website. And of course, the algorithm, it doesn't like the show. So if you do, share it. It really helps. And so does liking the show. We do want you to comment freely, as we do actually believe in freedom. But most importantly, take care of yourselves and the people around you. Try and have a good week, and we will see you next time.
Bye.